Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Dr. Dennis Carroll. Yes, it is always absolutely legendary to see you find your way into the darkness of the Fox Den so we again can link up for, of course, Midnight Lycanthropy. I do see you have brought me some food. I need to feast. Yes, absolutely delicious. And now that I do feel revamped and fully charged, it is time for Dr. Dennis Carroll and of course LordeStarfox to again go werewolf and Dogman hunting.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night. Yes, once again, you are tuning in to Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. We have a member of our science team and a good friend of mine, Dr. Dennis Carroll, who has already snuck past our guards and is sitting around the fire, throwing in some timber as we again burn the flame into the early hours of the morning. You are officially located in the stomping ground of the Midnight Society. Dr. Carroll, how you been, man?
Been doing okay, man. How about you?
Just been trying to get caught up, get everything in order. Also, just been doing a ton of editing and trying to work on my schedule. Pretty hectic. Unfortunately, I overbooked myself recently by mistake. Yet sometimes things just occur, I guess.
That's the way it goes. Like an old man once told me many years ago, it's one thing or another, but it's always something.
Right? Isn't that the truth, my friend? I mean, it is what it is. No complaints. I just kind of like to be able to figure out a little bit of a game plan. I mean, I'm not one to think too far ahead.
That's what I said. Somebody once told me, he says, a lot of these things need a manual, but the problem is most of the time you can't understand the manual.
Yeah, I know. It's trial and error. I feel like that's, again, obviously some people don't want to necessarily expel that brain power, but you just got to go in there and click around. And sure, when something's brand new, I mean, I could see how it could be anxious for somebody, or, you don't understand where everything is. But just like everything else in the beginning, you don't understand where everything is until you go up in there and start clicking stuff. I do encourage people not to get upset with it.
There you go. It's technology can be a blessing, but also a curse. But that's the way it goes with everything that mankind comes up with.
Right. And I remember back in the day, yeah, you'd get some manuals for things, but now you just gotta pretty much put it together. I don't think I ever read the manual. If anything, I would Google it or watch a tutorial video on it before I tried to read the little manual, I suppose.
There used to be a saying, my friend, the really truly adventurer is the one that throws away the instructions.
Right? Isn't that the truth? So what have you been up to, my friend? How's everything your way? You been doing any sort of specific research?
I've been doing some deep research again. I stay in the deep, dark rabbit holes a lot. I live there. And I've been looking at some of these Dogman reports, and Dogman is a fascinating creature. The more it's like a diamond in the rough. The more you look at it, the more sides you seem to see to it. But that makes it interesting, definitely. And I've been looking at Dogman in several different ways here lately, from a newer vantage point, you might say. And one of these is the dark, the tie, and it seems to have the darkness. There seems to be a definitive link with it and darkness, and a lot of people have. And I think you sent me a photo not long ago showing almost like a manifestation of these things. And a lot of people claim that they see Dogman manifesting in the woods and in certain bushes in the backyard or whatever the situation is. And I've been studying that angle on it for quite some time now. And I think that a lot of these things that people are seeing now, I'm going to say this right off the bat, is pareidolia. It's something that that the mind is a connection between the eye and the mind. Sometimes the mind is always trying to find patterns and pictures. We've got to understand that. But some of this stuff can't be explained away like that. Some of this stuff is definitely some type of, I think, some kind of spiritual manifestation. The reason I say that is because in my career, and I've been doing this now for well over half a century, I have actually seen things manifest spiritually in front of my eyes, and I know how they do. I know how the properties of these things go. And when you see something like that, you never forget it. It makes that kind of an impression on you, definitely. And I believe some of that is maybe going on in connection with the Dogman, and I had to look at it from some other angles as well, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. There may be a dark witchcraft type of a thing going on with Dogman, and it may also be related to some Native American curses that have been put on the land and guardians that they may have brought forth to do that. But I think this is one aspect of Dogman we definitely need to explore.
Sounds like you've been busy as always. Epic stuff right there. And I do agree. There's so much interesting stuff that's occurring. I don't even know fully where I sit anymore. I do still think some of the prehistoric and modern day predators are coming into play. Yet as I see more and more tracks, I keep on talking to witnesses from like Bray Road and other areas. It makes you wonder if there is more of a paranormal aspect, meaning how the tracks just vanished in the middle of nowhere. Well, what if they were only able to be here for that short amount of time, and then that's why they vanished? They never fully manifested. Just so much bizarre stuff. That picture I sent you as well came from a good friend of mine, JJ Messenger. He took that about 20 years ago, I believe. Hold on, let me get that correct information for you. Yes, he took this 20 years ago. It ended up being taken in Winsted, Connecticut, which is pretty interesting. He took this with a very old school camera.
Probably was the old type cameras that, now we're using digital, but probably it was one of the older type model cameras that I had when I first started into investigation. And I want to tell you something about those cameras, folks. They are really, here's what I liked about them. They had some bad things wrong with them. Of course, digital is so much more convenient and all that stuff. But the properties of these cameras, the older type cameras, were that you could blow them up, blow the pictures up pretty good. They had to seem like a somewhat better definition in different ways, especially with shadow and light, And here's what I like about the old cameras, and I still have one, by the way, the old 35 millimeter, and that takes film and not digital. It definitely, a lot of times, sees what the eye is seeing. You know what I'm saying? It sees what the human eye is really perceiving. And that's what I liked about it so much. I was telling somebody the other day on an interview, one of the best cameras, and I've used all of them, full spectrum cameras, the whole works. The best camera I found for investigation on things like this, and this would be definitely what, you would do for a manifestation and stuff like that. The best camera was one It was just a regular plain camera. It didn't, have an hour light. It didn't have anything, but it would see a lot of times what the human eye saw. And that's what you want. You want to get as close to the experience of what you are perceiving with the camera as much as possible.
Makes sense. Very bizarre and interesting stuff right there for sure. And that image, yeah, it's just creepy where it was taken back in 2005. It's also, he didn't see that manifestation or whatever that Dogman gargoyle looking thing was until he afterwards was looking at the images, meaning as he took that picture there, that's whatever it was, manifestation or smoke or steam, I don't know, was not visible. So very interesting stuff for sure.
Well, that's what I was mentioning too. The interview I was doing. I would advise everyone to pack an analog camera. The old type camera. Pack one with you just in case, because it is also it's still a valuable tool. But of course, you can use digital too. That's all right too. I got nothing against it. I like it too as well. But I would feel good with an analog type camera as well. Like I said, it has different properties and looks at things in a different way. Well, when it comes to something like this manifesting in front of you, you got to remember two very important points here. What you're looking at definitely is some type of spiritual entity in its entirety at that moment. It may be going into a solid format or form, but it is at that moment very spiritual or almost gaseous-like, in its properties before it forms into a hard physical reality. And that's definitely what you're looking at. And the other point is that what you're seeing manifest is also touching your mind in a different way as well. And now you're perceiving it. Like I said, the human mind is always looking for patterns, faces, whatever the situation is, looking for that image. And this thing, when it starts to materialize in front of you like that, it's connecting to your brain, whether you know it or not, in that certain way.
Wow. Very interesting stuff right there for sure. I don't even really know how to process too much of that because paranormal is not something I necessarily specialize in per se myself, that's for sure, because I don't know enough about it. I always like to make sure I have other members around me that know a little bit more about the topic per se than I do, which is why it's always great to link up with you and, just hear what you had to say right there, because that is definitely some pretty bizarre and interesting stuff that's hard to really overlook or even understand for sure.
Absolutely. And, from my point of view on this perspective, I've looked at it this way. The Dogman has certain of these dark properties attached to it. Some of it, here's what we got to look at, the big picture on this. Dogman is not very much like, it's very, can be compared in some ways to Sasquatch. But in some ways, it is a completely different animal altogether, completely different. But they may have spiritual aspects to them, both of them, that are very distinct. I think they do. I think they have some type of corporal and spiritual part of their nature. And I think, without doubt, Sasquatch, which I can tell you truly does exist because I've met the guy face to face, okay? I was very close to him. And the very strange supernatural qualities he exhibited that night still boggle my mind to a certain extent. It did some things that no natural thing can do. No natural type of animal. Believe me, I've run into just about every animal there is out there. I don't think I've encountered a moose. But anyway, there's a lot of them I've run into. And here's the thing I want to say that really differentiates between Dogman and Sasquatch. A lot of people think Dogman is just like an animal, some kind of like an unknown animal. I don't think it is in that respect. Bigfoot, on the other hand, may be some type of unknown primate, some kind of type of thing that we don't know about. And that, therefore, falls into the category of a true cryptid, okay? But when you look at Dogman, there's so many different properties to him that speak of a dark spiritual presence about him. It doesn't seem that much as being a part of the natural nature, as I've often said, but there's something else beyond that, almost going into the realm of the supernatural.
Makes sense right there. There's definitely so much going on, like you said, because it gets to a point where the pieces just don't fit per se on one side, but then they start fitting a little bit more on the other side, which is what you have to do as a journalist, is start to piece it together and figure out where all these things do belong, you know?
Absolutely, that's what investigative research is all about. That's why I have always been a boots on the ground researcher in real life. I go out in the woods, I do the things that need to be done. Believe me, I've spent many hours, many days, much of my lifetime out in the woods looking for these types of creatures, hunting monsters. And you have to take them each differently because they are just like different species of animals in many different ways. You can't, say sheep are very much like wolves or sheep are very much like cows. They're completely two different things, and you have to approach them that way, whatever they may be. And I think Dogman is definitely falling into that. But there's so many instances, so many circumstances surrounding Dogman that give him sort of, like I said, that dark patina. It gives him that dark connection. They're being seen so much in cemeteries and graveyards. They're being manifesting in front of people, going into prison cells and talking to people. The list goes on and on and on. These things are manifesting almost as supernatural type creatures, and I think that may be what some of them are. Now, I'm not going to say all dogmen. There may be a species or type of dogman that is more like the animals of the forest. But then there's something else beyond that as well. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at something that's coming out from maybe some different other dimension somewhere, something that naturally belongs here too? You got a lot of questions that need answers for when it comes to Dogman that you don't have a lot of those answers for, definitely. But we have to look at them and try to understand the properties of what we're hunting, what we're looking for, and what we're interacting with. And I warn people, though, please be very, very careful with anything, whether it's Sasquatch, Dogman, whatever it is, your next door neighbor that touches your mind. If it starts trying to communicate, bilaterally with your mind through telekinesis or, telepathy and stuff like that, you better be very careful because that is a very distinct spiritual property there, okay? Very psychic, very spiritual. And what you're dealing with is evidently a spiritual creature. They can be very dangerous to you in that respect. You have to be very careful what you're dealing with. And Dogman has put forth these capabilities to a lot of people. They have actually communicated with Dogman this way, which is very dangerous. Don't do it. I caution people, do not go that route because you could, open yourself up to some very bad stuff.
Yes, that is truth right there. Preach, my friend. Question: do you think there is more credence to it being potentially interdimensional or potentially extraterrestrial?
I think it's more interdimensional, and both. Well, really, when you look at it both ways, extraterrestrial can also be interdimensional. Definitely, it can be either way. But I think this thing is definitely interdimensional in many aspects. A lot of so-called spiritual entities are. I think without a doubt, we can't discount that portal capability, that interdimensional side to these things. Definitely is there. I think without a doubt. And we also got to understand the attachment of some of these things to what we call dark witchcraft, or the power of the dark arts, whatever name you want to give it. This dark magic and whatever. There are certain things that you can call up with dark magic that are called guardians. Okay, some people call them demons. Some people give them other names, but they are dark guardian spirits. They are dark, evil, malignant, malevolent spirits that will harm you very badly, not just physically, but spiritually and mentally as well. They attack you on all fronts, not just one. And you have to be very careful what you're dealing with. But a lot of times, a lot of the American natives of this country and other countries as well put these sort of type of guardians and curses on land that they wanted to secure, especially land they considered to be holy and sacred to them, so that these entities would guard and watch over these areas. And I think that, and even Bigfoot may be involved in some of this as well. But I think these things were put in place for that very purpose, to guard their special places. And when you enter those places, these things begin to hunt you. They began to look for you. They began to do their job, whatever it may be, especially if it is as a guardian for these things. You've already then, and unfortunately, entered on dangerous ground. It's just very much like, and I've told this to other people, it's very much like entering the territory of a mountain lion, a puma. It begins to hunt you because you're in this territory. A lot of animals are territorial, and I think that goes with demonic spiritual entities as well. They are even human beings are territorial, Some men will shoot you because you happen to be in their yard or something. Some people are that way. Some people and animals are definitely territorial, and when you violate that territorial law, you are putting yourself in a downright dangerous situation.
Yeah, that is very truthful as well. I actually learned that the hard way the other day with.
That is a built-in instinct, I think, And I've talked about this, none of us really, some of us, kind of quail at the fact of people touching us or being touched when we don't want to be touched. People invading our personal space, that's part of the territory too. And that personal space, I think, is connected definitely in many aspects to the spiritual being that you are as well. It is almost like a spiritual shield around you, or a hedge or a bubble. And if anybody or anything violates that, even animals have this, okay? Animals are very spiritual. A lot of times only human beings have spirits. That is absolutely not true. Even animals have this thing about that personal space. And you better hope you never get into the personal space of a bear who's having a bad day.
Right. That is very truthful. I mean, I saw something the other day. If you don't want to get into a raccoon's way or anything that's having a bad day, that is for sure, my friend.
Oh, yeah, but raccoons can be kind of vicious little devils, too. I run into them in the woods a lot of times. Matter of fact, once upon a time, I was attacked by me and another guy were out hunting. Were attacked by a whole family of raccoons. They were a bunch of vicious little varmints.
Yeah, I could see how that would be pretty terrifying to be attacked by little mini werewolves. They can be pretty vicious, yes.
That's basically what they are, definitely. If I could pick out something, either that or a Wolverine or something like that, it would definitely be bad news. But we got to understand that animals are not that different from us in many aspects, especially in spiritual things. But I think with the Dogman, getting back to the Dogman, I think he definitely has a spiritual side to him. And what I have seen of this is not a good, bright, happy daffodil picking side to him. Okay, he has got a dark, shadowy side to him, a dark spiritual side, I think, many times. So I think it is best to avoid it as much as possible. Now, I'm not saying if you're a monster hunter not to hunt him and not to look for him, but just be careful in case you really do find him.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Again, such interesting and bizarre stuff. And I'm right there with you. As I previously stated, the more I dive into this rabbit hole and the more I try and figure out what is occurring right here, I become more confused, meaning there just becomes so many more facets, right? When you think you have some answers, then you realize you're even more confused than you were previously,
Yeah, absolutely. The answers are there. Most of the time we have to look for them very closely and examine everything from the many different sides and angles to it. I have a show, matter of fact, the podcast called Paranormal Point of View. And sometimes when you're looking at something, you got to take that point of view and look at it that way. And it tells you a much better story to help you understand what it is. And then again, you also have to investigate things from their origin to try to find out exactly where they came from. And that way you find out the why, who, what, where, and how of it, That's where you come in with true investigation. But I think a lot of times that we have to understand, um, that what we look for, if it definitely is out there. And I've told this with a lot of monster hunters. Some of them will gear up like they're going to go fight a battle or war. They always gear up for these things, and I say, good, you look good. You got good intent, but what are you going to do if you actually find what you're looking for? Do you have a game plan? And most of the time they don't, unfortunately. So that's why I tell people, if you're actively going to look for something, whatever it may be, you need to have a game plan in place if you find it.
Yes, you do need to have a game plan for sure, because if you do not have a game plan, well, we all know how that usually unfolds for individuals, meaning completely chaotic. And I cannot stand Mike Tyson. He is a horrible human being, yet he has a pretty funny quote. Everyone has a game plan until you punch them in the face, So,
That's very
right.
true. Yeah.
So no, I
Yeah.
just, as you were saying, making sure to have a game plan, it made me think of his quote right there. Like I said, he's a horrible person, but yeah, it's true. Everyone has a plan until things go chaotic and wrong.
Well, you always need to have a plan, and then you need to have a plan B and a C and another backup for it, just in case. You need to kind of look at, like I said, about looking at all angles. You need to also consider a lot of situations and what may occur in those situations, and kind of try to be ready for that as much as possible as well. But when you come up against something like Dogman or something else very similar to that, or even like Werewolves, all bets are off on some of this stuff, because what you may be dealing with is not natural. It may be absolutely supernatural. And you got to take it from that perspective and understand that is exactly what you're dealing with. It's something beyond what, a normal animal would do or a normal situation. I was good friends with Linda Godfrey, and we talked many times about the Beast of Bray Road. And she was, at the very end, very opinionated on it being probably more of a werewolf of the Dogman in many aspects. And she had a feeling that it was someone that lived in that vicinity that was instigating some of this stuff. I'm talking about being the actual werewolf. We talked about that many times, and that was one thing, was definitely one card that was on the table with that situation. And that's why I say you've got to play all the cards. It's just like playing a round of poker, You got to go and pick out the best cards and try to play those for what they're worth. And if those cards are on the table, you'd best not ignore them, because that could be a very dangerous situation without a doubt. And when you look at Dogman, if he does have this dark connection, if it has an almost demonic spiritual nature to him in certain instances, you can't disregard that. You need to understand that forces of darkness and all that work this way are very highly dangerous. And you've got to recognize that fact when you're dealing with something very much like Dogman or anything else like that. You've got to consider the danger part of it, and equip yourself for that. Get yourself ready for it, and get your mindset on that, because that is going to be paramount to you surviving that situation if it occurs.
Yes, very valid point again, because surviving this situation is always something that you need to have an outcome for. And this reminded me, I did get a comment on our video where you had talked about the whole New Orleans thing, and the person in there being like chained to the wall, that beast or whatever. Somebody was like, if I ever saw that, I'd be moving out of the city. And I just had yet to have a chance to tell you. So I figured you would like that.
Yeah, well, I tell you, that would be definitely a bad situation to walk into, and I could kind of feel for the guys that had that experience. Definitely, anything like that, when you cross over that threshold into the supernatural, it is very discerning to you in many ways. It throws you off balance, and not only physical and mental, but spiritually as well. You have to be very careful. It's like that old saying, walk carefully and carry a big stick. You definitely need a big stick, because you do not know what you're encountering and what the true properties of that thing are. You can, just like we were talking about raccoons earlier, you can kind of understand where raccoons are coming from, what they are and what their nature is and all that in certain ways, especially if they get mad at you. But That's a raccoon. You don't know that much about Dogman. You know, we don't have one in a cage we can study. We don't have one in a zoo that we can go watch and take notes on. And that's what we got to understand. And what if its nature is something beyond that of the natural, which I feel like it is in many instances? That is also another factor that you cannot disregard.
Again, very true. All that excellent observations. It just really becomes harder to figure out, as I keep saying. I mean, every time I feel like I have some more credence to the topic or a little bit more breathing room, feeling like I have a good consensus as to what could be occurring, no, then I end up getting all this other quality information that, well, kind of puts me back on first base, you know?
Well, that's the way the research always does. It leads you back sometimes to where you began, but that's okay. That's okay. You haven't lost yourself, definitely. You're back at the beginning. And then you probably, when you get back there, you'll see another rabbit hole you probably missed. And you can go down that one to understand more. That's the way research works, especially investigative research. I've said this before. There are two types of research. I call armchair research. That's where you just read a book on it. But then you've got investigative research where you read the book and then go check into it. Then you go out into the wild and look into it. That's investigative research. That, to me, is the best kind of research of all, because it not only equips you with knowledge, but equips you with the best teaching thing out there, and that is experience. If you're going to, hunt these things, if you're going to be interested in them, you need the experience of actively looking for them, because that teaches you so much more. Looking at the tracks, looking at the bark on trees that they may have clawed up, or whatever the situation is. The more experience you get out in the field, the more it teaches you, more than you will ever learn in a book. Absolutely.
That is very true. Hands on, just getting out there and trying to figure out things that are occurring. And another really cool tidbit of information, a lot of those old school movies like King Kong and Adventure to the Center of the Earth, all those, old school like adventure movies, to an extent, are based off of explorers' supposed experiences, which I found to be pretty cool.
Good. A lot of times, unfortunately, we can't trust the science. You heard that old expression, follow the science. Sometimes you can't do that because it can be very misleading. Mankind has manipulated nature so much. Look at all the many dog breeds that we have. They didn't originate in nature. Mankind made those things. We manipulated them. We bred them that way. We bred them for different jobs, like bulldogs for herding bulls, sheepdogs for herding sheep, hunting dogs for hunting birds. The list goes on and on. We did that. Nature didn't do that. Okay? And we've got to understand, when you go into hybriding some of this stuff, like that with the direwolf and all that, that's a good, noble cause to try to bring it back. That would be neat if you brought back the real, actual direwolf. But that's not what that is. That's very misleading to claim that that's a direwolf. If it's 100% direwolf, then I'll believe it. I'll go along with it.
All right, and great observations too. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize the dire wolf is related to jackals, not even related to modern day wolves whatsoever, which is super interesting.
Absolutely. They're very, when you get in, there's certain even breeds. Take, for instance, a donkey and a horse is what you breed to get a mule. Most of the time you don't breed mule to mule, you breed that way. That's how you make mules, okay? Other things are that way, okay? But here's the thing, here's the point I want to make. Is that really a good thing? And a lot of times with nature. Why we should be fooling around with nature like that? It's kind of dangerous, because who knows what you may come up with. It's sort of the Frankenstein complex. They're playing God. When you better watch out, because whenever you play God, you usually open the door to some pretty bad stuff. You usually end up creating a monster that seeks only to destroy you.
Yes, that is very true. And as we are starting to tie this to something else they have done recently, which probably isn't the smartest, you should look into this, is they have created hybrids of Nile crocodiles and saltwater crocodiles, because crocodiles actually don't have that issue that you were referring to where you have to breed certain ways. There is none of that, meaning if you put a Nile crocodile and saltwater crocodiles together, they can reproduce. Yeah, straight up creepy. No.
But what happens when one of these things gets loose and goes out and breeds with the real crocodiles out there in the wild if they're not careful? And we've had this happen with other stuff, like the snail darters and all that stuff. They've turned loose in rivers that have destroyed rivers and the system of those rivers and all that stuff. Here's the thing about it. They want to go ahead. A lot of people in science are very, what I call loose cannons. They want to go ahead with something before they really consider all of the ramifications of what it is they're truly doing. And that's never good. You need to consider everything that could happen out of that action, It's like that great frontiersman Davy Crockett used to say, first find out if you're right, then go ahead.
Yeah, isn't that the truth right there for sure? That's some excellent observations. Well, Mr. Carroll, as we are starting to tie this up, what are you going to be working on here in the near future? Do you have any big time projects or any sort of specific cryptid or paranormal things you're going to be working on?
Well, I'm still working on my book. I'm deep into that, trying to get as much work as I can done on that between the podcasts that I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately, but that's okay. I enjoy that as well. But I'm still working on my book, Paracryptidology, Hunting Monsters and Things of Nightmare. And I think it's going to be a real big splash in the cryptid world once I get it done. But I'm going to include sections on vampires and sections on werewolves. There'll be a section on the demonic. I'm going to put a lot in with this because that's where the name comes from, paracryptidology. Once upon a time, there was the paranormal and cryptidology. Now they're both together. They've meshed together, whether we realize it or not. They are now one and single field, and I call it paracryptidology because it goes beyond just plain cryptozoology, and it goes beyond just plain paranormal stuff. You got a combination of both in this, and whether we realize it or not, we're looking at both aspects of the same coin.
Yes, we are. That is some excellent stuff there as well. If you ever do want some guests too, I have a gentleman I'm going to be speaking to that has written a few books on vampires and things like that as well. You might be interested in speaking to him. So yeah, if you ever want any guests over on your thread that fall into what you're trying to cover, I can definitely send you some people your way for sure. And how's everything going with your intro and outros? You need any more art or anything, or are you all set?
Yeah, that's looking good, man. I'm getting a lot of compliments on those intros and outros that a certain friend of mine did for me, and they're really, really doing good. People like them, and that is sort of what these things. When you do that, it's sort of like indoor. I call it indoor advertising. You kind of get people's interest started and stuff like that. So that's what outros and intros are good for, definitely. But I really appreciate what the work you've done for me on that stuff, because I'm not that computer adept at a lot of this stuff. I'm learning it slowly.
It's got to plug away, my friend. So that's excellent. Yes, as long as you are, like you said, trying to learn it and adapt. And of course, if you ever need anything, make sure to let me know. That's what friends and teammates are for. I also have your 2 newest logos you sent me. So from here on out, on our thumbnails, I'll get those up on there. I'm going to put a little bit of a border around it, and I'll send them back to you too. So feel free to use them as well.
That'd be terrific, man. I appreciate that very much.
What else are you going to be up to for the rest of the night, my friend? Anything else? Are you just going to be working on the book, your podcast, or?
Yeah, well, like Alice, I will definitely be going down some more rabbit holes. And I think one day I'm going to run into Alice down in one of those rabbit holes, definitely. But I'll be doing some more research. That's where I stay a lot. Doing the armchair research tonight instead of the investigative research. But that's good, too. And, I've been interested in this stuff since, I guess, before I could walk or talk. It's always been a fascinating aspect of this universe to me. And what would this universe be without it? It would lose a lot of its spice. There wouldn't be any juice left in the universe if you didn't have its mysteries and its supernatural and unnatural side to it, the paranormal side. That to me is always what makes it, life worth living in many aspects, in many ways.
Boom. Well, listen to that. No, that's true. Every night before I go to bed, I do enjoy watching things that are educational, but I also do kind of like watching some spooky things too. But I make sure that I'm still learning stuff, even though, well, some of the spooky things you learn about like real life crimes and things, you're like, wow, that is just so messed up. Yet, again, like after I finish up with you here, when I'm doing some editing, I'm going to be listening to this guy called Gator Jake 456, and he talks about like crocodiles and things. So again, I just really like to learn, yet I do not have the most free time at all. So I usually have stuff up in the background. At the moment, my free time is invested in rewatching True Blood, and I've sent you some segments of that. I'm on like season 5, episode, I believe, 3 of season 7 that I do need to finish up to. So sooner than later, I'll have that caught up. Yeah, that's pretty much my only free time I invest is a couple episodes of that per night.
That sounds like you definitely got your itinerary set out on that for sure, and you might be doing a little binge watching on that. I do that once in a while. If you ever get a chance, you might want to check out the series. Unfortunately, it was only 1 season long. If you've never watched any of the Dresden Files, fascinating stuff.
I'll have to look into that. I've never heard of that. That reminds me of that 80s show. You must have heard of this. It was only 1 season, but it was called Werewolf. That was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, that was a great series. Yeah, I loved it. Actually, it was based off of a comic book series called I, Werewolf.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. That is awesome. No, I didn't get a chance to watch all of them, but I had a chance to watch a pretty good chunk of them. And yeah, that was definitely a cool show too. Unfortunately, they need to bring back the werewolf in a good way, not so much a bad way. I do have a werewolf movie for you to watch. It's not the greatest werewolf movie, but the werewolves look awesome. They are straight up costume. There's no CGI whatsoever, and it's for free on Tubi. It's called Operation Blood Hunt. It's got Quentin Rampage Jackson in it, and it takes place during World War II. Like I said, though, the werewolves are awesome. They look different as well, meaning traits they have when they are humans and they transform, they still have those traits or like certain little like strands of hair color. It's awesome. But the movie overall isn't that great, yet the werewolves are amazing. So it's worth checking out just because of that.
Sounds a little bit like one of my favorite werewolf movies, Dog Soldiers.
Yeah, Dog Soldiers is way better, but yes, it's kind of similar to that. But the werewolves look really good, man. So you should check it out, dude, for sure.
Sounds good.
Sweet, my friend. Well, is there anything else you would like to touch base on tonight before we let you get back to your busy schedule, Dr. Carroll?
Well, I just think, that we have to be careful in how we deal with certain things that are out there, because we do not know a lot of their properties. A great deal of their properties still remain unknown to us. This goes for Bigfoot, Dogman, werewolves, whatever the situation may be that you're looking for. Just bear in mind that you don't know that much about it. You may know a lot, but you still don't know enough about it that may secure your safety in certain instances. So be very, very cautious. We don't need to get fearful on these things. We don't need to let fear rule us or overtake us. We need to turn fear around and use it as a weapon for us, for our own purposes. We need to get a handle on our fear if we run into it like that. And we need to understand, I've said this many times, fear and I parted way company a long time ago, okay? Fear will inhibit you from doing things that you need to do. Don't let it do that to you. Overcome your fear. And one of the best ways to overcome fear is to make what's unknown known. The more you know about something, the more you study it, the more you look into it, the more you read about it, the more as much as you can learn about it, it will make it more known to you. And that will make it less fearful in many aspects. That is one of the greatest fears of mankind, as H.P. Lovecraft said, that fear of the unknown. But once something becomes more known to you and you understand its mindset a lot, it becomes less fearful. And that gives you a grip on the fear. Okay, so let's not let the fear overcome us. Let's not let the fear rule us and overtake us. Let's use that fear. Everybody has that fear, but we need to use it. We need to turn it around. Instead of being against us, we need to use it for us in many aspects. But we got to also be smart. On the other hand, we need to always be smart and be cautious. If you're walking in unknown territory, and I mean that physically and mentally as well, and spiritually too, if you're walking into unknown territory, you have to be cautious. You would be foolish not to be. Even knights wore armor. You need to protect yourself, and knowledge is one way to protect yourself. Not just carrying a big gun or a knife. Knowledge is another great weapon that we always need to use for things like this. So always equip yourself with these things when you go out to look for certain things like this and you're investigating or whatever situation is. That is the number one thing you need to work on, and make sure that you got the right kind of handle and grip on that.
Boom. Excellent stuff right there, my friend. Spot on as always. Yet, to the audience, this will be the conclusion of the meeting of the Midnight Society for the early hours of the morning. If you are interested in what Dr. Carroll is up to, his links will be in the description of the video. You can pop over to his YouTube thread and see his live shows, or you can go to his Facebook page as well. Yet, do make sure to check out the playlist of Dr. Carroll and myself down below to get caught up on our previous content, and be on the lookout for our bi-weekly content that will be consistently churning out. We have many good things on the way, and we do look forward to helping everybody figure out the proper information. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, and take care, and happy trails.
Ooh, my creatures of the night, I do adore every single one of you. And thank you for hanging out tonight. Please like, comment, subscribe, share the truth to the algorithm, and we will see you very soon.